Good evening, I'm Prasad Michael and you're watching Kini News, the show that brings you today's biggest stories. We start today's episode with a meeting held at the PKR headquarters attended by Dr. Mahathir and even Shafie Apdal. For a change, not only did Anwar Ibrahim attend the meeting, he chatted. After that, some good news from Dr. Nur Hisham. Anwar Ibrahim chaired a meeting with Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, Warisan President Mohamad Shafie Apdal and Pakatan Harapan's top leaders at the PKR headquarters in Petaling Jaya this afternoon. This is the second time Mahathir has set foot in PKR's headquarters, while it is the first time for Shafie. Based on pictures taken inside the room the meeting took place in, Anwar could be seen sitting in the centre between Dr. Mahathir and Mohamad Sabu. MPs loyal to Mahathir, Warisan and Harapan are believed to be in the midst of coupling plans to form a new government. There has been a series of meetings so far between the various parties, but discussions are believed to be in a deadlock.
Discussion? No. So
very positive.
So any decision for the...
we will issue a statement shortly.
So there's a decision?
We will issue a statement shortly.
So about the statement is consensus for all the opposition party leaders?
We will issue a statement shortly.
Okay.
A few hours before we enter the Recovery Movement Control Order, Malaysia is showing some positive signs as a result of its COVID-19 response. As the nation enters the recovery phase of its COVID-19 response, the Health Ministry today shared some positive signs that we're on the right track. Not only did Malaysia record the highest number of recoveries in a single day, with 281 patients being discharged, today Health Ministry Director General Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah told a press conference that none of the new cases spread locally involved Malaysians.
Sehingga 9 Jun 2020 jam 12 tengah hari, terdapat 7 kes baru yang telah dilaporkan. Ini menjadikan jumlah kes positif COVID-19 di Malaysia adalah sebanyak 8,336 kes. Oleh itu, jumlah kes aktif dengan kebolehjangkitan COVID-19 adalah 1,244 kes dan mereka telah diasingkan dan diberi rawatan di hospital. Ingin dimaklumkan, daripada 7 kes baru yang dilaporkan hari ini, 6 kes adalah kes import yang mendapat jangkitan daripada luar negara. Suka cita dimaklumkan bahawa pada hari ini tiada kes penularan dalam negara dicatatkan di kalangan warga negara Malaysia.
Tomorrow, Malaysia is set to enter the Recovery Movement Control Order with further easing of regulations, with interstate travel and various recreational activities allowed. The EMCO begins tomorrow. Here are some things you could look forward to, but just keep in mind social distancing SOPs are still in place. The Recovery Movement Control Order comes into effect tomorrow, and in a press conference today, Senior Minister Mohamad Sabu highlighted some of the changes that will be taking place. With interstate travel allowed under the RMCO, police roadblocks on major highways will be dismantled.
PDRM akan menarik balik semua sekatan jalan raya rentas sempadan negeri bermula 10 Jun 2020. Mana hari ini adalah hari terakhir untuk sekatan jalan raya rentas negeri, kerana besok bermulalah kebenaran untuk rentas negeri. Jadi tidak ada keperluan lagi walau bagaimanapun untuk kes-kes lain seperti ops benteng, kes tentang sekatan untuk memantau jenayah dan sebagainya, jenayah lain akan tetap diteruskan oleh pihak PDRM seperti biasa.
Under the RMCO, restaurants and convenience stores will also be allowed to remain open for longer. They will no longer be required to close at 10 p.m.
Oleh itu, mesyuarat khas telah bersetuju untuk membenarkan restoran, gerai-gerai makan dan semua perniagaan menjual makanan, outlet yang menjual makanan ini, untuk beroperasi sehingga jam 12 malam. Namun harus ditegaskan, penjarakan sosial dan SOP yang telah pun ditetapkan sebelum ini perlu dipatuhi sepenuhnya. Kedai-kedai serba nikah dan runcit yang dulunya beroperasi 24 jam, kini kita benarkan beroperasi sehingga 12 malam, bukan lagi 24 jam.
Other businesses located in highway rest areas will also resume operations tomorrow. Meanwhile, zoos too would be allowed to reopen, starting tomorrow subject to set SOPs. Responding to Rapid Rail's statement that it will end social distancing measures on its trains tomorrow, Ismail Sabri said the rail service has no authority to change the social distancing regulations set by the government to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Rapid KL buat keputusan. Rapid Rail. Rapid Rail ni tidak ada kuasa untuk mengubah dasar ataupun peraturan yang ditetapkan oleh kerajaan. Apabila kerajaan menetapkan perlu ada social distancing ataupun penjarakan sosial di dalam rail mana-mana, mereka tidak boleh dengan sewenang-wenangnya mengubah apa yang telah pun ditetapkan oleh kerajaan. Kalau mereka ingin membuat sebarang perubahan, mereka perlu memohon daripada MKN untuk membuat sebarang perubahan, bukan tiba-tiba umum mengikut apa yang mereka rasa perlu umum.
Former Sabah Chief Minister Musa Aman said evidence of his innocence against graft charges were very clear and indisputable after he was granted a full acquittal. Here's more on that. Former Sabah Chief Minister Musa Aman has been acquitted of 46 charges of corruption and money laundering linked to timber concessions in the state. The prosecution had applied to withdraw the charges and wanted a discharge not amounting to an acquittal of the accused. Considering the prosecution's move to drop the charges, Kuala Lumpur High Court Judge Muhammad Jamil Hussain exercised his judicial discretion to grant Musa a full acquittal. When contacted, Musa's counsel, Francis Eng, confirmed that his client has been acquitted. Eng said all charges have been withdrawn and Musa has been acquitted and discharged altogether. Previously, it was reported that Musa had filed an application to strike out the 46 charges. The charges were dropped before they had a chance to go to trial. Malaysian courts will resume the delivery of justice, but with strict compliance to health and safety directives. All courts will be fully operational from July 1st, following an instruction by Chief Justice Tengku Maimun Tuan Mat. This was in line with the announcement the country was moving into the recovery phase of the Movement Control Order starting tomorrow. Maimun's instruction was revealed in a statement from the Office of the Chief Registrar of the Federal Court today. The statement further said that the Malaysian judiciary body is fully committed to ensuring the delivery of justice is continued, while at the same time ensuring all safety and health regulations issued by the National Security Council and the Health Ministry are adhered to prevent the spread of COVID-19 during court operations. Muhyiddin on Sunday announced that the country would be further easing regulations and standard operating procedures as it moved into the recovery MCO tomorrow up to August 31st. These include relaxation of regulations pertaining to interstate travel, non-contact and spectator sports, social activities, as well as reopening of businesses such as hair salons, beauty centres and nail spas from June 10th. Following this, the government announced that all government services are to be fully operational during the implementation of the recovery MCO. The latest move is to further ease the country closer to new normal practices as the COVID-19 infection cases continue to drop. Coming up next, thousands have paid their last respects to George Floyd. A picture of George Floyd was displayed at the entrance of the Fountain of Prayers Church in Houston during the public visitation for George Floyd's casket. Thousands of mourners braved sweltering Texas heat on Monday to view the casket of George Floyd, whose death after a police officer knelt on his neck ignited worldwide protests against the mistreatment of African Americans and other minorities by U.S. law enforcement. American flags fluttered along the route of the Fountain of Prayers Church in Houston, where Floyd grew up, as throngs of mourners wearing face coverings to prevent spread of the coronavirus formed a procession to pay final respects. Solemnly filing through the church in two parallel lines, some mourners bowed their heads, others made the sign of the cross and raised a fist as they paused in front of Floyd's open casket. More than 6,300 people took part in the visitation, which ran for more than 6 hours, church officials said. Fire officials said several people, apparently overcome by heat exhaustion while waiting in line, were taken to hospitals. The public viewing came 2 weeks to the day after Floyd's death was captured by an onlooker's video. As a white police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 5 minutes, an unarmed handcuffed Floyd laid face down on the Minneapolis street, gasping for air and groaning for help before falling silent. The case was reminiscent of the 2014 killing of another African-American, Eric Garner, who died after being placed by police in a chokehold while under arrest in New York City. The dying words of both men, "I can't breathe," have become a rallying cry in a global outpouring of rage, drawing crowds by the thousands to the streets despite health hazards from the coronavirus pandemic. The demonstration stretched into a third week on Monday. Unleashed amid pent-up anxiety and despair inflicted by a pandemic that has hit minority communities especially hard, the demonstrations have invigorated the Black Lives Matter movement and thrust demands for racial justice and police reforms to the top of America's political agenda ahead of the November 3rd presidential election. Protesters in a number of U.S. cities were initially punctuated by episodes of arson, looting and clashes with police, deepening a political crisis for U.S. President Donald Trump as he repeatedly threatened to order the military into the streets to help restore order. Meanwhile, Trump was appalled by calls for cops to be defunded, and he's looking at a number of proposals in response to the death of Floyd.
But he definitely, as he's noted, recognizes the horrid injustice done to George Floyd and is taking a look at various proposals.
Does the president feel that there is systemic racism in law enforcement?
The president's been very clear there are injustices in society. I've noted several for you that he's pointed out as a Republican primary candidate, noting the Sandra Bland video was absolutely horrible, noting George Floyd. There's a civil rights investigation into that. He definitely believes there are instances of racism, but look, he believes our law enforcement are the best in the world. He believes that by and large they are good people. The 750 who were injured defending this country from rioters and Antifa in the streets, as to be distinguished from the peaceful protesters, those 750 officers who were hurt defending our country were heroes, as was David Dorn, a police officer who lost his life, and Patrick Underwood, who also lost his life in the last week or so.
The bail for Derek Chauvin, the officer accused of murdering George Floyd, had his bail raised to $1.25 million. Bail for the former Minneapolis police officer charged with murdering George Floyd, whose death ignited 2 weeks of protests, was raised by $250,000 to $1.25 million at a hearing on Monday. Former officer Derek Chauvin has been charged with second and third degree murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death in Minneapolis by kneeling on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. Chauvin made his first court appearance by video link. He was handcuffed in an orange jumpsuit sitting at a small table, the Minnesota-based Star Tribune said after the hearing. Access was limited to a small group of reporters. Minnesota Assistant Attorney General Matthew Frank argued that the severity of the charges, as well as the strength of public opinion against Chauvin, made it more likely that Chauvin would flee if set free. Chauvin's bail was raised to $1.25 million from $1 million without conditions, and to $1 million from $750,000 with conditions. The conditions include prohibitions against working in law enforcement and contact with Floyd's family. Chauvin would also have to surrender any licenses or permits for firearms to qualify for the lower bail amount, the order said. Chauvin and his attorney did not object to the bail conditions, the Star Tribune reported. Floyd's death has triggered the largest nationwide protest in decades as demonstrators call for policing reforms and policies to address racism and inequalities in society. And that is all from me today. For more stories, you can go to KiniTV.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook for the latest news updates. I'll be back with more tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Prasad Michael. Thank you for watching.